Hi, guys. Welcome to another Monday night study. Last week, we talked a little bit about the idea of um, demonic tricks, things that demons will try to get you to get confused, do things you're not supposed to, things like that. And then at the end of that, I asked you guys if you would like to have in this fall a study on prophecy or a study on post-flood Nephilim. We'll end up doing both. Probably about 50% to two-thirds of you said prophecy, and then the other was probably a good third was wanting the other. So there's several things we can do, and I plan on doing that. Tonight, what I thought I would do is just do a real brief overview of prophecy, where I'm thinking of heading with this, and then eventually we'll end up doing both. So I've changed my stuff around a little bit, so if I sound funny, just let me know. But I think we've got cameras and everything looking really good. So tonight, let's just go delve into it. Basically, we want to talk about prophecy in general. Most of us, well, all of us, want to focus on end time prophecy. That's what everybody does. So, like the Essenes back in the day, were focused on the end time prophecy of their age, which to them is the first coming, how the Messiah sets up the age of grace, all those things that happened. For us, we're looking at the second coming and all those things that are the setup for the second coming, the kingdom age. So that kind of stuff. And we've got a lot of things like that. We all know about the Battle of Armageddon, briefly anyway. We've heard the terms. The Battle of Gog and Magog. There's a war between Israel and Russia. There's a war between Israel and Iran. Probably different wars, not necessarily, but probably. There's the destruction of Damascus. There's a lot of things going on. And I think we're in the middle of seeing one set of those prophecies right now from last year to 2026. So I want to kind of pull some of those things together. So tonight, I just want to kind of recap a little bit of some of the things we've talked about in the past, and we'll go over them in detail. And the thing I want to show you is, first, if we go to the Bible Facts website, and this is what we were doing last week, but if you come here, BibleFacts.org, we also have our Dead Sea Scroll calendar, our bookstore, and then giving. So and we added something, I didn't mention it before, but we've got Give, Send, Go, PayPal, and if you want to send a check or send a book or a manuscript or something like that. But down here under resources, we've got different things. We've got Dead Sea Scroll studies. So if you want to look at everything that we have as far as the Dead Sea Scrolls Old Testament, that would be in here. So we would look at, I need to get rid of my underlines. They look kind of strange. But Dead Sea Scroll Old Testament, it's a PDF actually, but if we have Genesis chapter whatever, and if we do, is it identical? Is there a difference? Things like that. So we've got all that kind of stuff in here, but I want to go today under photos and prophecy charts. And so we're going to look at a few of these. So I've made up some of these. These are actually all creations that will be eventually in a book. Some of these are in books. Our number one prophecy book, if we went to look at it, is Ancient Prophecies Revealed. So this one right here. I don't know if it'll show us or not, but I don't know if it'll let us do that or not. Okay, so there we go. So what this does is it takes 500 Bible prophecies and puts them in order of fulfillment. So we started with creation and go all the way through the future events, modern Israel, apostasy of the church, rapture, tribulation, that kind of thing. And that was done about a decade ago, and people have asked, can you please revise it? And we're working on a revision of it. So if we come back here, that's what we're looking at. So this particular chart is in that book, although it's black and white and this is color. But this is my rendition of the statue from Daniel 12. What we want to do is pull together the things that we know for sure. Then we can speculate on the other pieces. So for instance, in this chapter, it's when you study Daniel, it's very obvious who the empires of metal are down to the toes. And then it mentions some things like they mingle themselves with the seed of men and other little cryptic things. And we're not exactly sure what those mean, but we are sure of most of that chapter. So if we looked at most of the chapter and got that and then went forward with other things, we could speculate a little bit and be closer. And that's what everyone has done. But the thing that I want to do is do this with the Bible and with the Dead Sea Scrolls and what the church fathers say on anything that they knew. So anything from the Bible, their Bible commentary. So for instance, when we look at this, let me try to see if I can make this a little bigger. That's a little better. Okay, so anyway, yeah, that's good. The metal empires of Daniel. And most of us remember this from chapter 2. There's a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, legs of iron, and then feet and toes of iron mixed with clay. And throughout Daniel, he makes it very, very clear that the Babylonian Empire is the head of gold. Well, that was ruling from 607 BC, when it first started attacking Israel, to when it was destroyed by the Persians, and that would be 537. So that's this era. And then from 537 to 323 was the rule of the Persians, when Alexander the Great came in and everything became Grecian. So, and that's, so gold is Babylon in this prophecy, Persia is silver, Greece is iron, or excuse me, brass. Brass or bronze, it's a copper alloy is the main thing. In other prophecies, it's just called copper. So that's something to know about. And in other prophecies, we see the Grecian Empire breaks up into 4 pieces. And so it gets very detailed, which is important for end-time prophecy. But as far as this goes, it's all the Greek influence. So this just shows it as one thing. And the Roman Empire starts with 64 BC when it comes in and takes over Israel. All this stuff is focused on its dealing with Israel, when it starts, when it stops, if it's destroyed, if Israel's destroyed, the dealing with Israel. And that's where we get these numbers from. So anyway, Rome starts out as one empire, and then in 395 it splits into 2. And then later on there's a third split, according to another prophecy. And we've looked at a few of those things. But in this particular one, we don't even start there. We start with the fact that there are 2 separate legs. Now up here there's the Babylonians, and these are the Medes and the Persians, these 2 arms, and then the Greeks, and then 2 sides of Rome. So that's the east and the west of Rome. So the division occurred in 395. And these are all the dates in the the chapters for who they are. And then the dates, of course, we can just look at history and see who did what. Everybody knows that when you pick up the book of Matthew and start reading about Jesus' birth, there were Romans ruling the land. And they don't tell you why, it's just what was going on at the time. It's because it was in this area, this time period. So you've got the Western Rome and Eastern Rome and Byzantine and the Holy Roman Empire, the revivals, Germany, Nazism, all that kind of stuff. So we get down here, and this is either 1917 or 1945, depending how you read other prophecies. But then we have this clay empire, and there's some things about that. So this is still in development down here. So anyway, we look at these things, and if we stop at that point, that's what I was taught in seminary. But if you stop at that point and you go forward and look at the early church fathers. So for instance, let me just do this real quick. Try to do this again. And in our bookstore, it's bigger. Okay, so we talked about the ancient, not that one, ancient prophecies revealed. Okay, and then along those in prophecy, though, we have another book, The End Times by the Church Fathers. So we have a book on church fathers, which is just what they taught on lots of stuff. And this is specifically about the end times. So if you take this book and read it, they're not authoritative, of course, but this is what they thought. Did they think about a pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib rapture? Were they premillennial, amillennial? What did they say about it? What did they say about Daniel's 70 weeks, the image in Daniel? And so they would explain it, and they would explain it exactly the same way we would. So when you look up their writings, and this is the main people in here are Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Hippolytus, and Ephraim the Syrian, but then there's several others. And they actually wrote prophecy books, so we kind of looked at that. So anyway, they would come back and say the same thing. So this is Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then some sort of a revived Roman Empire or a mingled together empire of sorts. So it's pretty interesting to look at this, but this is a general idea. And most of us would be very, very familiar with this because it's Daniel, and most of us have studied it over and over again. So let me get out of this. We'll go back to here again. So this is Daniel. And here is a picture from the Metal Empires of Noah. So this is from a Dead Sea Scroll. And this Dead Sea Scroll, and we'll study these in detail so we can figure things out. But basically, it talks about an olive tree, which is obviously Israel, and it talks about other trees around it, which are nations. Nations fight against nations. But these empires, mountains of metal, come up, and they destroy and rip out any and all trees. So it's an empire trying to take over countries. Not just like France fighting with Spain or something like that. Somebody wins, somebody doesn't, border problems. But a world war where somebody wins and actually takes over everything. And so they have lead stones, soft metal clay, and then gold, silver, copper, and iron. And you can see that Daniel's image starts with here in gold, silver, copper, iron, and then clay. And Noah has another lead and then another clay. So it's interesting to kind of look at this and try to figure it out. There's more detail. So in this, and there's secondary prophecies to this, but in this you have, and we're not going to touch on any of it, look at the scriptures or try to study it in general. This is just an overview for tonight. But in general, when you look at these things, you see the same thing. And this it amazes to me. I can see Nebuchadnezzar saying, I saw the statue and it was made out of these metals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What do you think? And I can just see Daniel going, somebody tell you about Noah's Testament? And if not, God must have told you. So it's just really interesting for him to see that stuff, if you know about the school of the prophets. So you have, and again, what we want to do, we don't want to add to the Bible, but we want to study all the prophecies of the Bible, study their interpretations as taught in the New Testament, and then compare it to the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you'll see it's identical. And then look at their interpretation of other things to see the same stuff, just to know that we're right. And then other details we may have missed. And then when they talk about the school of the prophets, the other prophecy books, we want to get those if we can and study them. So Noah's Testament is pretty interesting. So it sees all these things. Now in his time, he was dealing with this one lead empire. And he would die, probably before this empire is dissolved. So he's being told there's all these from the beginning to the end. And then now, all you got to focus on is this. And then we have the rest of the story. So we've got a lot of details on those things. And again, if you want these things, you can always come to BibleFacts.org prophecy charts. I'm trying to make really good charts so we can talk about them and you can print them out, things like that. These will eventually be part of, I don't know if the title will be the same, but Ancient Prophecies Revealed #2, sequel. So we're going to be mainly focusing on the Bible, end time prophecy, and then what the scrolls said about it. So things like that. So along those lines, going back to here again, I guess I can get rid of that. But Noah's empires are these. And this is the empire that he has with Nimrod and Abraham. It's during that time period, towards the end of the first age. And then we have the rest of these that he would work with. So he sees this in a vision, and then he begins to see the second part of the vision, which is this here. And in this case, he sees the earth being destroyed by a flood. And in the center of it rises up this tree. Well, obviously that's him. Adam was the king, started all the human beings on the planet. All that was wiped out. So Noah is the king with all the beginning of human beings again on the planet. And it goes forward. And then we're going to have a Messiah who's a ruler of the entire planet. But anyway, so it's obviously that. And he sees this tree, and the tree has 3 main branches. Well, that's obviously Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And there's all these little sub-branches, little countries from them. And then the bottom tree, obviously it would be Shem at the top, and then the bottom one, this doesn't really show bottom, but the bottom one was Ham, middle one was Shem. And towards the bottom of the bottom one, 2 leaves or twigs or branches break off. And they travel up north to attack the northern branch. So that's these 2 here, like in the dream. That's why I want to create these things, just so you can look at one picture and it brings back all that information. So anyway, in the dream, what this is Nimrod coming in from would be the east, and Canaan coming up from the sea and establishing a colony and attacking from the west. And they join forces and form the Babylonian Empire. And we're told a little bit about Canaan, and that's why Noah had cursed Canaan when he woke up from his sleep, because he'd had a prophetic dream, which is what this is. This is the prophetic dream mentioned in Genesis. And it's so old it doesn't matter anymore. So we have enough to understand that Canaan came in, and then Noah came, Nimrod came in from the other side, and it focuses on Nimrod being the supreme ruler, much like the Medes and the Persians in that first picture. The Persians were the main ruler. The Medes were secondary. So Nimrod was primary, Canaan was secondary. But anyway, so that's what this is. And then there's a prophecy of, how it ends and all. And so it's interesting. So the Lord is saying, okay, there's going to be these empires. They're made out of metal. That's how you identify them. And it's not just in Noah's Testament. It's also in the Ezra Apocalypse and Enoch and I think a couple of other things. I think there's a church father that quotes it too. But we can focus just on Daniel too for that outline. So you've got all these outlines, and then now you'll never live to see the rest of it. So let's focus on this, which is this. Okay, it's the same with us. We can look at this and see the repetitiveness of it, how they formed a false religious system, how they were like an antichrist person. Their religious leader was like an antichrist or a false prophet, and the tyranny that started and how it started. And we can see everything's going to be different from time to time, but the basic ideas are the same. And when you see it over and over again, you kind of know what we're looking for this time. And you begin to realize why our founding fathers said we have to resist tyranny, not just for us and for our children, but because of prophecy. Very, very specific. So anyway, let me get out of this. We'll go back here again. And there's some other pictures in here too. But like we'll get up to eventually the heads of the dragons. So each one of these has 2 horns or 2 sets of horns with other things in it. So there's like usually an east and a west or a north and a south. So it's interesting prophetically. Babylon, again, is made up, hopefully you can, let's see if I can make this a little bigger. That's a little easier. Is made up of Canaan and Shinar, or Canaan and Babylon. And then Egypt is made up of Upper and Lower Egypt. So there were 2 different groups. Babylon is Assyria and Babylon. And then the Medo-Persian Empire were the Medes and the Persians. And then we come back down here, you've got Syria and Egypt for Greece. And we won't explain it, but we will in detail when we come back and look at this later. And then for Rome, you end up having Rome, Eastern Rome, and Byzantium. So the Byzantine, while that's still going on, you have the Holy Roman Empire. And then these things basically fall apart in 1917. So just about 100 years ago. Unless, of course, you consider Hitler trying to revive them, not being successful, but trying as the last-ditch effort of that empire. In which case, this goes to 1945, which 3 years after that, the nation of Israel is born. And we're going to look at some of the timeline prophecies, too. We're going to look at the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, just enough to prove where we're at right now on the calendar, and then plug in the prophecy dates. There are 3 dates that are prophesied in Scripture, and that is the death of Christ being in 32 AD. Now, it's on their calendar, but if you put it on the Gregorian calendar, it would be 32 AD. There's supposed to be a second revival of the nation of Israel, which is supposed to occur. The actual date isn't. All these 3 are in Daniel. In Daniel, the date was supposed to be 1948, and then for some reason they don't have the Temple Mount when they come back for some reason, but they eventually take the Temple Mount back, and the date for that is supposed to be 1967. So with these 3 dates, even if you don't plug in anything else to them, 32 AD, 1948, 1967, it lets us know for sure when Christ was here, and then we can replicate that back and know, give or take a year, but pretty close, the date of creation, plug everything in, then we start seeing patterns. Other patterns that we don't normally see are because the Dead Sea Scroll calendars work in patterns of jubilees, which are 50-year periods. We usually do centuries, 2 jubilees, but each jubilee is made up of 7 shmitas, or 7-year periods. And so they're off when you get to year 50. So in a century, the first 50 years is slightly different than the second 50 years. So when you're just looking at a number, like this year is 5949. Is that right? Yeah. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but if you break it up in sets of 7 with breaks every so often, and that's the pattern, then all of a sudden, sometimes the prophecies, you see patterns emerge, which you wouldn't see otherwise. So they're there, but you see all sorts of interesting things. I'm not talking about gematria or anything like that. Not disrespecting it either. This is something different. But just to see that kind of stuff. So then we can take 32 AD, 1948, 1967, and know prophecies were supposed to happen on those years, and they did. And then we can go forward. The Dead Sea Scrolls have another prophecy, not in Daniel, but a secondary prophecy that I believe occurs in 2026. So that's another date. Not sure what happens, but something happens. And then in Daniel, there's 2 other date systems that may be in here, but those are speculative because they're future. So those are the things we want to look at. And then that 10-nation empire, same thing. It's like an Eastern and Western Roman revived empire of some sort. So you've got something like that. So that's the dragon heads in general. And let me... Boy, oh, okay, I made it really big. That's what it's doing. Okay. Well, we can do it like this. Anyway, these are some of the pictures, and then there's a few others. So I want to kind of build on that. So let me kind of pull this together. This is a chart we don't have yet. I'm still working on it, but let's see. We did this one. We did that one. Okay, this one here. So this is a chart kind of pulling together some of the major prophecies from the Bible, from the Church Fathers, and from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then anything else that they recommend. So, for instance, starting in the center column here is Daniel 2, and you can see the head of gold, chest and arms of silver, the copper or brass or bronze, however you want to call it, belly, iron legs, and then feet and toes of clay. And what we can do is go back and see in Revelation, it talks about the 7 kings, and it says that 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. So we've broken it up into 5, 1, and then there's that mysterious middle piece that's not mentioned anywhere. And then the one that's to come but hasn't come yet. And so that's obviously the iron of clay. The one that is, when John was writing it, would be Rome, so that's obviously the iron legs. And before that would be copper, silver, and gold, and then 2 others. And people have always asked, what were the other 2? You know, that kind of thing. And now we know from Noah's Testament, he fills in the gap. You start off with the stone lead kingdom, which was Nimrod's Babylonian Empire, which ruled from 1908 to 2123 AM. We can figure those out. On the calendar, it's amazing how closely those things come out, give or take a year. And then Pharaoh's Egyptian empire with the two halves is the clay. And this is corroborated on several other documents. I actually found a medieval Byzantine history text that actually mentioned this. So that was kind of interesting. Anyway, then you get gold, which is Nebuchadnezzar's empire, and then silver, and then copper, and then an iron one, which would be Rome. Then a mysterious lead something empire, and then clay. So this is totally new to me, this one here. But what's interesting is we go back in chapter 7 of Daniel. He has a winged lion, a bear, a four-headed leopard, and a nondescript beast, which goes along with Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. So different things like that. And I've got a picture of an eagle here, not just because Rome had the eagle was Rome. Much like in chapter 8, the ram is Persia and the goat is a symbol of Greece. So that's obviously what we're talking about. But there's another prophecy of how the Roman Empire envelops in from 2 into 3 and back again. So it's a really interesting prophecy. It's the prophecy of the three-headed eagle, which we have right here. And so this being a nondescript beast, and it basically just says this is a totally different kind of beast than these other three. And you don't know what that means, but if this is a lion, a bear, and a leopard, strange, but still a lion, a bear, and a leopard, those are land animals, kind of the kings of the animals. The lion is the best predator in a certain area, as far as cats, bears, and leopards. And an eagle is probably one of the king of the birds, so to speak. And there's actually, I found out later, there's actually other Jewish documents that talk about Leviathan and Ziz and things like that. So we'll get into that stuff too. So this eagle. And then there is in Daniel 11, we have an outline of the king of the north and the king of the south. There's several groups of people. And then we get into a Antichrist time period. And then Enoch comes in telling us about 11 Gentile gaps. And if you haven't seen our Enoch series, we just finished it in the first half of 2024, and we talk about the Gentile gaps and how that comes together. And it's pretty interesting to see that. So if these are all real prophecies and they all fit together, we can begin to see how they fit together. And if there's something over here, for instance, about the 10 toes, they mingle their seed with the seed of men. What does that mean? Well, if you can go over here, maybe one of these others can answer it. And so rather than trying to speculate, if we can really pull some solid information together from the scrolls, from the school of the prophets, not Gnostic stuff, because that stuff is junk, but actually Qumran scrolls or anything that they recommend that we read. So, for instance, when I started studying the church fathers to see what their explanation of Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 and Daniel 8 was, they made a big deal about the book of Enoch, which I'd never heard of before. So if they recommended it, it probably ought to be something we'd look at. And then I found that R.H. Charles had done a translation from the Ethiopic, way before my time, so I started studying that. Since then, we've got other chapters, or not other chapters, but a handful of chapters in Aramaic and Hebrew from the Dead Sea Scrolls. So again, pretty interesting stuff. So to corroborate the fact that nobody made that up in the Middle Ages, rather. So anyway, then we have this three-headed eagle, which tells us all about the Roman Empire. So pulling this together, we can see there was a led Nimrod Babylonian Empire, pharaohs, and then we have Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian Empire, Persia, and Greece. And those are the 5 that were there. And they correspond to these pictures in Noah, in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, Daniel 11, and in Enoch, and in that time period. So we get to the one that is, which is Rome, which looks like it just finished right before our lifetime. So unless it's still kind of going on. With all this talk of Russia taking over and Europe forming its own Roman Empire, none of those may or may not happen, but it's interesting they're talking about it again as a way to fix the problems. You're either being too democratic and there's anarchy, or you're being too monarchy-like, empire-like, and people are being savagely destroyed. So there's extremes of both of those. So in here we've got Noah, Daniel 2, 7, Ezekiel 38 and 39, the Magog War, and then that three-headed eagle in the time of the Babylonian. And this might be out of place. Maybe this is further up. And then this lead kingdom I was confused about. But what's interesting is that the church fathers talk about the senseless desert nations. And the Ezra Apocalypse mentions the same scenario as the dragon nations of Arabia, actually. So it's an Islamic thing that comes up in time. And this is the old kind of Christian Roman Empire. These two clash, always have had. And even when the empires go out, you still have Muslim versus Christian, or Catholic versus Muslim, or something like that. But the interesting thing about this that I found is that in Zechariah 5, there's the mysterious woman who goes to build herself an empire or a throne or a temple in Shinar, which is Babylon. Babylon connected with this. And she's sealed there until her time, and she's sealed with a lead ephah, or a lead lid on the ephah. So you've got lead, and then you've got Mystery Babylon mentioned in Revelation. And Gad chapter 2, this is another book that the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about. It wasn't found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but it's another one. We were one of the first to do a translation of it in English. So they have a moon kingdom, basically, which is the end time kingdom. And Gad talks about a camel and a donkey as being two separate anti-Semitic religions. One headquartered somewhere south of Israel, whose symbol is a crescent moon. Well, that's definitely Islam. And the other one is a powerful monotheistic entity headquartered in Rome, Italy. Now, back when this was written, neither one of those would have been a thing. But it's interesting that those become a power. And Gad basically is saying that they've always been and always will be until the second coming. This kind of a empire attitude, at least, kind of coming and going. But they're not the main problem. There's a break off or a group from these two groups that form the harlot religion. So that would be Mystery Babylon of Revelation 17 and 18, or somehow connected. The religious part. There may be a totally different part that is an empire part, and a totally different part which is a commercial part. So those are things we still don't know. But it's interesting to have that. So you've got the lead ephah of Zechariah 5, the moon kingdom of Gad chapters 1 and 2, the lead kingdom of Noah's Testament, Dead Sea Scroll, the dragon nations from Ezra Apocalypse, and then the Mystery Babylon person, woman, harlot, religious system from Revelation 17 and 18. So you can kind of see what we're doing here. If we were just studying Revelation, we know that well, but there's some questions. If some of the questions can be answered from Ezra, from Zechariah in the Old Testament, from Gad, or from Noah, we're going to have a lot more details and a lot more information. And that's kind of what I want to do to bring these back. Now, do we know for sure? I think we can trust Zechariah 5 and Revelation 17. Whether I'm putting them together properly or not, you would decide on that. But should we trust Ezra, Gad, and Noah? Well, I think we need to at least look at them. It's always possible they're corrupted. So you've got to understand this is Scripture, these three are not. So hopefully you can see my pointer. But we want to go there. So the one that doesn't come is a clay kingdom. It has not yet come, is a clay kingdom, the last one, which is the iron and toe feet of clay, which is said to be a 7-year period in the scrolls, in the church fathers, and also in the Bible. It consists of the Antichrist ruling through 10 nations, which are the 10 toes. Well, Daniel 7 has that nondescript beast having 10 horns. A little one arises and destroys 3 and becomes the 8th of the 7. And so that's more details of the other stuff. Same thing about the toes, so we can see the corroboration here. So clay, 10 toes, 10 horns on the beast. And then we still have the continuation of Daniel 11 with the king of the north and the king of the south. Tells us more details about the Antichrist. And then we have this, what's called a dragon kingdom, which is connected with these dragon nations. So very interesting. That's just kind of an outline. But I think we need to look at some of these big pieces. So in doing this, we need to be an expert in Daniel, chapters 2, 7, 8, and 11 and 12, basically, most of Daniel. Revelation, Zechariah, and then we also need to be very familiar with Noah. Noah's Testament's a small testament, so it's smaller than Gad, but Noah, and to be familiar with Gad, and to be familiar with the Ezra Apocalypse, and the book of Enoch, which fills in some of these gaps. And I think when we do this, we can begin to see more detail. I think this is all part of, in Daniel chapter 11 and 12, the end time scenario. It says that many will run to and fro and knowledge will increase. And I think that's mainly, or at least partially, finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And when you plug in Isaiah 29 as being the definitive chapter describing when Israel comes back the second time, then the old ones begin to speak out of the dust of the earth. If it is the second time, that's 1948, and the only way old ones could begin to speak that are dead out of the dust of the earth, if they come back as a ghost, if they're not going to do that, the only other way is a writing that they left. But we would have their writings unless those were buried in the dirt, like in a tomb or something, and we dug them up. You find the tomb, the body, the gold, the treasure, and then these notes, these scrolls. So I think we're headed for a really good outline. I'll show you some other outlines in the coming weeks, but I would like to start this prophecy study, kind of like what we did with Enoch, but I want to go relatively slow because it'll get probably pretty deep pretty quick. And if you guys familiarize yourself with Daniel, you probably have already done that. And then some of these other things, we'll get to them. So, okay, we'll go ahead and stop there for tonight. I just wanted to kind of give an outline for that. We'll go to the chat room and see. Let's see here. I did have another question for you guys. Some people have said that they liked, well, for a while we had a 24/7 live stream going of some of the stuff, and some people liked that and some didn't. We could put something like that on a secondary channel, because some people said they wanted to just put something on and listen throughout the day, or listen at night and go to sleep, or that kind of stuff. Anything like that would help us make a few dollars too, just through the advertising revenue. So a couple of people have said or asked about, since we have, like you can go out there and find Jasher and Jubilees and some of these books. And when we did our translation of Gad, it wasn't over here anywhere in English. So I took just the text and made it public domain. So the public domain of like my book on Gad, the public domain version was 40 pages. With the commentary, it's 100. So I'm long-winded sometimes. But so the books are there for you to buy and support the ministry and have physical copies. But if we had a playlist, either on our channel or another channel, that's just the text. So like you could listen to Zechariah, you could listen to Gad, You could listen to Jubilees and to Enoch and stuff like that. Not the commentary, the studies, but just the text. I know other channels have done that anyway for some of those. So would you guys like that? Do you think it would be of good interest? Sometimes you want to study, and other times you just want to listen to the text over and over again, like we do with Scripture. So you can just let me know. I left the comments on again in this one, so you can let me know what you think in the text. So let's go to the chat room. Oh, I was already there, I think. Hold on. See about questions. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at this. Gifted 5 memberships. Thank you very much. Really appreciate all the support through here and through GiveSendGo and PayPal and all the other support. So thank you very much. First question is, I've heard some pastors teach that we are in the era of the 4 horsemen from Revelation 6. Is there any merit to that theory? I don't think so, and it depends on how you interpret Revelation. But in Revelation, you have chapter 1, which is a kind of an introduction to the book and an introduction to the church age. Chapters 2 and 3 are the 7 churches, which mirror the church age. So chapter 4 then is actually 4 and 5 are an introduction to the tribulation period. So in 4 and 5, you have the believers now, not on earth, but in heaven. You have the 24 elders, you have the Lamb coming and then unsealing the scroll and starting the time period. And so then from chapter 6 to 18 would be that scroll, which would be the 7-year tribulation period. And then chapter 19, you have the second coming. And chapter 20 is all about the millennial reign and on going on. So that's how I see it. So if that's correct, then the 4 horsemen are in chapter 6. So the first one would be the Antichrist. And some people have said, well, the Antichrist can't just go poof and be here. He's got to, when he comes on the scene, he's got to be elected ruler of a country or a group of countries or something. And those countries have to already be here, that kind of thing. So the setup is here. And if you think about it as him taking over a revised Roman Empire and coming to power through a harlotry system, the 2 harlotry systems we see in Gad, and then the empire, Roman Empire in its various forms, Byzantine and Holy Roman and Old and some of the others that might be around, Ottoman and others. Since you see that, those things are here and have been here for thousands of years, or not thousands, but hundreds of years anyway. Well, in the case of the religions, hundreds, I guess. So a lot of people think that way, but I would look at the rider on the right horse as being the Antichrist. So even if he has been born, if he's like a teenager or something, he still hasn't risen to power. So that rider on the white horse, whoever, whatever he is, he's coming to power. He's going forth, conquering and to conquer. So you'd have to be basically a general of some sort. And Alexander the Great was a general, was a king, and led his armies, I think when he's in his 20s. So that's not really hard for that. He couldn't do it at 10 necessarily. But so a lot of people think this way. One of the things I thought it was, well, I won't mention that, but there's several different theories out there that have popped out. And like, I think it was yesterday or the day before, President Trump was at a rally, and there was a shooter that tried to assassinate him, grazed his ear. And thank the Lord he's still alive. But somebody within hours was equating the bullet scratching the ear to the Antichrist being wounded, the eye and the hand and the wounded unto death part. And I'm thinking, well, first off, the Antichrist is not the president of the United States. He's supposed to be the ruler of a country north of Israel. Secondarily, a wound unto death is a wound unto death. It's not a scrape on the ear. Even if it took off a chunk of his ear permanently, It's still not a wound unto death, you know. And so a lot of people will speculate on things like that. And it's like, well, it's not the right time, it's not the right place, it's not the right group of people, you know, those kind of things. So I don't think there's any merit to that. I guess the answer was no. But good question, though. I thought Gog was in Turkey. Just wondering why a lot of people are saying Gog is Russia. Can you help explain this, please? Thank you for these Monday night studies. I look forward to them. Well, thank you. I'm glad you're here. Basically the Magogites, and you can go back and you can look this up. The easiest way would be to look at Josephus, and then the church fathers mention it too. But basically, the majority of the Magogites became Scythians, and there's several other records about when the language changed from the Tower of Babel. Like Jasher will mention the Magogites, and then mention the first 2 or 3 Scythian kings as their kings. So that's the area of southern Russia. Now, part of the Magogites did migrate down to Turkey. So that's where the confusion comes in. Like America, just because I'm here, my father's from Denmark, so I'm Danish. But my mother is half Irish, so I'm half Danish, quarter Irish, and then a quarter everything else, whatever it might be. So, question then, am I Danish or am I Irish? Well, I'm American. Yeah, but I came from those two. So Turkey, you know, is Gog in a sense. It's also the same kind of a thing with the house of Togarmah. You'll notice in Daniel and Ezekiel and places it'll mention the house of Togarmah of the northern parts, as opposed to the house of Togarmah of the southern parts. It's a different kingdom. So Togarmah can mean 2 separate places. Magog can mean 2 separate places. And there's several places like that. And a lot of times, the big question in that kind of prophecy is, are we talking about the original starting land or the people? So if it's the original starting land, it's Russia. If it's where at least one group of people went, it would be Turkey. And then we might find that an even bigger group of people went, or now they're bigger, and they're in this country. So that's where it gets kind of confusing on that. And Turkey was the one that controlled the Ottoman Empire. So Turkey is a candidate, or has been in the past, for that kind of empire-like mentality. So, but yeah, if you look at Jasher, Jasher makes it clear it's Russia. It's the Scythian group where the Magogites originally started from. And then you'll see the same thing from Josephus. But he will add the whole part about part of them being in what we would call Turkey. Became a member, angel level. Thank you very much. Again, glad you're here. Super chat, $5. Thank you very much for the support. Super chat, $10. Thank you very much. Thank you for the audible books. I'm not a very strong reader, so audio helps me tremendously. I'm kind of the same way. If I really want to study something, it helps me to read it and listen to it at the same time. And back when I was in seminary, there never was, I mean, we had the Bible on cassette, and I'm dating myself, cassette now. And then CDs came out. They were really cool. But yeah, if you could listen to them and read them at the same time, I would listen to them several times and then listen and read. So that it does help a lot for most of us. So, okay, slow the speed down a bit and absorb what you are teaching. Okay, you do. Okay. Now I'm on Ancient Prophecies Revealed. Okay, well, I hope you like it. It gives us a good understanding of prophecy. My idea on that book is to start with the earliest prophecies, and we're just put them in order of fulfillment. So some guy said this would happen, that was yesterday. And some guy said this would happen, it was just announced this morning. And then somebody else says this happens afterwards, hadn't happened yet, it'll probably be tomorrow. But when you see this, all the way up, and then you finally get to one like That was that. Yeah, I was at work that day, and they interrupted everything to say how it blowed up and the guy got killed, and I remember that. I was so when all of a sudden it gets into the area of your lifetime and you remember it, then you all of a sudden know all of these prophecies are and were real. So the next ones are equally real. We might be misunderstanding them, looking at Russia instead of Turkey or vice versa, but we know something's coming and we can look at that, and it's definitely not Australia. So just be wise, be looking at Turkey, be looking at Russia, and anybody else that an old person, an ancient like Josephus, an old historian, or someone would have tell us there's actually a small group that went here. Then make sure to look at that too. So thank you very much. I'm glad you're doing that and it's helping. Is there any evidence of the Apostle John's writings written in Hebrew in the Dead Sea Scroll? No, it's all Old Testament and then the intertestamental period stuff. I don't think there's any. There's a few fragments that people try to say are New Testament, and I suppose they could be, but you're talking about little bitty fragments like a half of a word or 2 words. That could really be anything. And I think when you start saying, hey, we found Mark because it says hi, that's really pushing it. And it might be, but I'd rather see a whole paragraph and then for sure. But, and in my case, I mean, the way I look at these things, I don't really care so much because I have Mark and I understand it and believe it to be the inspired word of God. And if these things point me to other things that fill in the gaps is kind of what I'm after. As far as it being written in Hebrew, I'm glitching now. I was thinking. The book of Hebrews is said to have been written in Hebrew, and then the Gospel of Matthew, that's what it was rumored to be written in Hebrew and both translated into Greek. If that's not the case, very early on, it was written in Greek and translated into Hebrew, one of the two. So, and again, in our case, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference other than the fact if we could find an original or a Hebrew version of one of those two dating at least back to the 1st century, then we would look at it and see if there's any, how did you translate this Greek word into Hebrew or vice versa? We really might learn something. Maybe not, but we might learn something. So keep looking for it. Okay, thank you for the question. Are you all aware of the Van Rensburg's family and their translation of the Hebrew Gospels? I'm not sure about the name, but I do know, like recently there has been, I think that's what you're talking about, it was made public not too long ago. And I have links to some of that stuff, and I have not looked at it yet. And again, the question on those things, there's been, and I don't know if it's the same or not, we'll have to look and see, but there has been not several, but like 3 or 4 different sets of Hebrew New Testament pieces. And most people tend to agree they're Middle Ages, so they don't consider them authoritative. I'd still like to see how they were translated. So there's a few of those. This one I think is different and just recently come out. So we will, excuse me, I don't know what I've been doing today. We'll have to look into that. So I do have links to it, but I have not looked at it myself. Thank you for mentioning it, though. Could Noah's-led empire be Ottoman? Israel not in the land, but Moon Kingdom, etc. Possibility. There's been a couple people speculate on that. Very few, because most people don't even look at those things. But yeah, there's this led empire between the two. If you consider the Byzantine Empire to end in 1453, then the Ottoman Empire is something that comes later, so it's kind of an extension. And it's looking like it's got something to do with Islam, so it very well could be that drifting into another. So rather than looking at the Ottoman Empire as just simply an extension of the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire begins to kind of fizzle out on that leg, and goes Islam, which continues for a while until the reestablishment of something. So that's a definite possibility. And another way of looking at it is it's all kind of the same kingdom, switching religions back and forth. So that would explain, something like that would explain why Daniel shows two Roman Empire pieces, two legs, from start to finish. It's not like down to the knee and then he splits off into two or anything. It's two straight legs. But then the Ezra Apocalypse has a three-headed eagle, and the three heads are the breakoffs to the Roman Empire. So there's a third one somewhere, and that seems to be contradictive, unless, of course, the third fizzles back into the second or something along those lines, in which case you might as well just call it, for all intents and purposes, after the fact, just two. If two split for a while and then came back together, especially if that was in the Middle Ages somewhere, why even mention it? So there's something like that going on between the two of them. So that is one theory, that it might be the Ottoman Empire. Slipping down in my chair. Need your prayers for my granddaughter, Becca. Baby seems to be coming early. Dangerous pregnancy from the beginning. The family alone in a new area, so no one to help. With boys 9 and 7 and a hubby. Okay, let's say a prayer for her real quick. Lord, we pray for Becca and the baby that's coming. We pray that there's no complications, that everything go well, that there's no accidents or anything along those lines. We pray for their salvation, for their seriousness and dedication to you, and we just pray for your blessing in their lives. We thank you. We pray in Jesus' name. Do you think there are any parallels between the two clay empires, Egyptian and last empire? There has to be something. And that was like that one Byzantine history text said something about a skirmish between Byzantium and something about Egypt. But in the process of describing a war or a tax thing or something, it mentioned that the clay kingdom of Daniel is Egypt. And I thought that was interesting. Now, they could be mistaken if they assumed that the end times were back in the 1400s, and the only person around that might do it would be this guy, so he must be it. A lot of times we do that. I remember my parents thinking back in the 80s when I was in high school that it can't get much worse than this. Rapture's got to be around the corner. And it wasn't. It's been another 30, 40 years since then. Anyway, okay, so 40 years. Yeah. But there's definite parallels between them in some form. So it says Egyptian, and Egypt was the one at the south at the time. And then even in the middle part, like in the end of the Grecian kingdom, right before Rome, Syria and Egypt were both Greek empires. And so at the same time, there's something along those lines. So it may not be that Egypt itself causes a problem again, because it's just a small country. But something about that region. So if Egypt took over a bunch of empires and was the capital, like Turkey did with the Ottoman Empire, it would definitely be Egyptian. But if it was, say, maybe Libyan right next door to it, or Sudanese or whatever, it still could be thought of as like an Egyptian bloc. But there's got to be some sort of parallel, and it would have to be involving Egypt, I would assume, or the Egyptian land, or that kind of thing. Another thing to look for is, all the way through the thousands of years, Egypt being like here sometimes could expand this way and come back, and then expand down and come back. And so we really need to look and see throughout the centuries how big at the biggest part it was in different directions. And then see right now, maybe like Upper and Lower Egypt, if you like at the first one, the picture we showed you, if you look at it that way, that's Egypt and Sudan. Not Ethiopia, because it's too far down, but So there could be something like that. So that gets into a lot of speculation, and I want to do that, but I want to hit the text really hard first. Where in the Bible do we get the date of May 14th, 1948 for Israel's rebirth? I think it's chapter 4 or 5. And I got in trouble for that particular video, so it's not on YouTube. It is on Rumble. So you can go back and look it up. Just go back and look for 1948 or prophecies, something like that. But basically, the 32 AD date is very clear. It's in Daniel chapter 9, and it says, from this point, so many days, this thing happens. And you can identify those. Taking the same math, the way Sir Robert Anderson and other people have done the calculations between the Roman calendar and the Jewish calendar, and in our case, it would be the Jewish calendar and the Gregorian, the normal one we use today here in America, and replicate those out. The texts talk about a certain number of days or cycles or something. They give you a number for the reestablishment of the temple vessels in one chapter, and the reestablishment of the Jews going back to their land in another chapter. So those are very well hidden. But when you pull them out and you look at them, they come out to be 32 AD, 1948, and 1967. So we do have that. I got in trouble because, let me say it really nicely. I said that Israel was supposed to become a country again at this time. And when this happened, they were attacked by this guy. Now, this guy in Scripture is referred to as Moab. And then I talked about the Scripture. But I brushed over it because I was running out of time. It was a Prophecy Watchers conference that we put up there. And so I just simply said evil Moab, because that's what the Scripture calls it, evil Moab at the time. And I said, if this was 1948, then that country would be this country. And I'm not going to tell you who it is. You can look it up. It's really obvious. But somewhere along the line, somebody got mad and said, that's hate speech. You're slamming a country that Israel was at war with at a time and saying God was on Israel's side. That means Satan was on the side of the other guy. And that's basically hate speech. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So that went bye-bye. But that's over on Rumble. So we have, I'm looking at all the other things that are good. Truth Social is a great idea. It just started out very limited. It was more like Twitter, X, and that's not something that I can use very much. But then they added groups to it. So that made it a little more like Facebook, and now they're talking about media streaming. I don't know if that just means watching their public TV or if it's like a YouTube type thing or whatever. But either way, you've got locals and you've got Rumble and you got Truth Social, and then you've got Telegram is great for instant messaging and stuff. We have let me switch over to this real quick because I'm not doing this. There we go. Okay, I usually flip over to this when we do the live stream because I've got the donate button. That goes to Give, Send, Go. And then let me flip over here. This is our network. This is actually BFN for Bible Facts Network. It's bfn.biblefacts.org. So if you go to the website, there's a link there. You can click on it. It's actually through a group called Mighty Networks. And I picked that one because we can have a type of curriculum, kind of like what we're doing here. So if, like the Enoch series, if somebody got mad on Rumble or YouTube or wherever and said you can't do that here, we could put it up there and it would be safe. And so we're saving copies of that stuff and beginning to do that kind of thing. So anyway, so it's nice to have that, and it's a private group you can join. There's no censorship or anything. So anyway, so that's the network and the other. So we're looking at things like that. Things are changing. I mean, people can only be pushed so much. they're going to go other places. And if there's only 2 Christians on the planet, then nobody cares anyway. But if we are a large group of people that are getting fed up with things, we want to speak our mind, which is our God-given right according to the First Amendment, then we do that. And I'm not saying that even that these guys are wrong. They have their platforms. They want certain things talked about. And like I say, ours is censorship free. But if you joined and started talking about how great the Satanic Church is and how you wanted people to sacrifice, humans or whatever, you would be gone in a heartbeat, because I wouldn't, I would get rid of you for that. So I guess it's not technically completely censorship free. It's a Christian network. It's a Calvary Chapel type Christian network is what it is. So if you like that better than the others, then definitely do that. So okay, network, and then our donate button. So let's see here. But that's up at Rumble. So, and I think we might have that on the network too, but I'm not sure. Super chat, $5. Dr. Ken, David Wilkerson preached on a grabbing onto arms of the altar. Love the sermon. Still not clear just what the horns of the altar are. Thank you. Yeah, in the Old Testament, we had they had a thing to where if you grabbed a hold of the horns of the altar, it was like when little kids have a safe place, you're being chased. So it's similar to the idea of a refuge city. You're being hunted. You go there, you're going to stay there, so nobody will hurt you. The king could order you executed anyway, but it's a safety type thing. And so that's kind of what we're talking about when you talk about grabbing hold of the horns of the altar. It's going somewhere safe, possibly repenting, trying to get out of being persecuted or killed. Yeah, David Wilkerson had some amazing things. Why do you have the Magog War during Rome? I thought it was tribal before. That's just a ongoing picture, and I've just kind of thrown some stuff in there, just trying to get it organized. So it either starts up, and it depends on how far Rome goes. I think Rome is over 1948 or excuse me, 1917 or 1945, but it may come back again. And if you have like the 3-headed eagle, the theory, one of the theories is, and we will cover this later, but one of the theories is that when Byzantine died out, was taken over by the Ottoman Empire, some of the daughters went and intermarried in the Russian royal line. And then shortly thereafter, you have czars. So when you say, I'm a Kaiser in German, I'm a Caesar in Rome, I'm a czar in Russia, you're basically saying I'm of a certain bloodline, that bloodline, I'm related. So for a while at least, a lot of people were teaching that in Russia that they were the new Roman Empire, or that it just migrated, and they were to guard for orthodoxy against Roman Catholicism and all that stuff. And that's kind of fizzled out now, but it's either it went into the Byzantium, which obviously it did, but that would be the third offshoot. So Russia could actually be the new Roman Empire, possibly, on that particular thing. Don't know. We'll have to see what happens, but something along that line happened. So you've got the players of Holy Roman Empire and Byzantine / becoming Ottoman, and then Russian. Those are the ones that China never claimed to be the Roman Empire, for instance. The United States never claimed to be the Roman Empire. But these 3 or 4, actually, these 4 did, a continuation of the empire. So how the 3 and the 2 legs of Daniel 2, the 3 heads of the eagle, fit in with the 4 powers or empires, we're not sure. But we just need to be aware of each one of them. So good question, though. And understand, I could be totally wrong. I could be looking at this backwards. But it doesn't matter so much. I'm just trying to get you guys to understand Daniel 2 is important. Noah is important. Maybe I'm looking at it totally backwards, but that's why you need to look at it and decide for yourself. but then there's the Magog War, at least know about it. And then the more you know about these other scrolls and prophecies, the more we might be able to pull them together. Super chat, $100. Thank you very much. Again, we really appreciate all that. Helps us a lot. Became a member, Archangel. Oh, nice. God bless you. Thank you very much. Isn't Tubal in Turkey? Ezekiel 38. Possibly. It depends on the name. Some people have tried to say Tubal is Tobolsk, which is in Russia. Other people try to say it's in Turkey. And I'm not really sure of the name. I can see it a couple of different ways. And again, that's the tricky part. It's like when you realize most of the Magogites were Scythians, or Scythians, however you say it, which is southern Russia, but there was a subgroup of them that did go to Turkey. So to rule Turkey out completely, we need to keep in the back of our mind that both are candidates. I think it's more logical to assume Russia rather than Turkey, although if Turkey was to establish a new empire, Islamic one. I guess it depends depending if you're looking at it from a Roman standpoint or an Ottoman, Muslim empire. But it's a possibility. I'm not saying that either one is correct. I'm saying in a sense they're both correct as far as running the genealogies down. But only one works unless somehow Turkey and Russia come together. They're far enough apart, though. I'm not sure that would work. Became an angel. Okay, Eric, thank you very much. Glad to have you on board. What do you think is the overall purpose, what was the overall purpose was of all the ancient cities of ziggurats throughout the various locations on the planet? A documentary noted how they were all symmetrical or aligned somehow. Yeah, that's something that they talk about a lot. Stonehenge and the different monuments, pyramids, ziggurats, all those being connected like in a straight line. So if you start here and you go this way, you'll run through 2 or 3 of them. I have not really tried that. I've had friends do that with using Google Earth, and that's actually probably making it possible to check that now. And so I'm not sure. There was a theory of ley lines, but that was, as far as I can tell, was made up like in the 1970s. And it was based on an older manuscript, but it was still, it's almost like when you make up a theory and you might be right, but you're probably not, but no one knows for sure, but then everybody accepts it as concrete. So there was a theory of ley lines, which may or may not have a connection with these. That would make sense if they are actually in a line. Otherwise, I don't know why they would be, except possibly for communication or something like that. So there's a lot of theories about that. L.A. Marzulli talks about that kind of stuff occasionally, and he's got several different theories. So don't know about that one per se. The Israeli news platform you had on your website is closed down. Is there another news outlet from Israel that you use now? Not really. The main thing I do these days is I'm on Telegram, and I look at Amir Sephardi's channel, which is Behold Israel. So he has a channel, and he's, as far as the news, just news, not speculation or a whole lot of stuff. And then, of course, what he's doing in ministry. That's probably my main go-to for Israeli news. Yeah, Debka was a wonderful site, but it closed down a ways back. I didn't even realize it closed down for a couple of years until I went to click on it on the website and then realized it had shut down. That was a pretty cool website, though. I liked it. The ziggurats could have been small representations of pyramids of Egypt. Okay, I gather. No doubt an area of pagan worship. Yeah, I would agree to that. True that both Egypt and Syria will fall into Antichrist hands during the tribulation. Yes, because he should be ruling. He's supposed to be ruling from an area north of Israel, And several texts, several church fathers talk about him being from the tribe of Dan. And that either means he's Jewish Jewish in the sense of being a direct descendant of Dan, a Danite, or that he's just a person born in the area of the tribe of Dan. So if he's a king north of Israel, he's probably not Jewish. And if he's in the tribe of Dan, the area of Dan is the tip of northern Israel and southern Syria, and maybe a piece of Lebanon, I forget, but it's right up there in that area. So that sounds like he would be ruler of Syria. And now, if that's the case, he's definitely king of the north. The king of the south is Egypt. It has been through all those things in Daniel chapter 11. So, and then he comes down to conquer Egypt. And that's when Egypt and Libya and it says Ethiopia, but it's probably more Sudan or Sudanese or something like that. But the three nations come against him and then he destroys them. And that's when the Nile River is destroyed. That's what's funny to me, because people will say, I think we're in the middle of the tribulation period. Then why is the Nile River still here? You know, just one of those things, if you take it literally. And I'm sure they're going to say it's symbolic of the flow of knowledge and the internet or something, but it means what it says. It's the river. But it's a good point. Okay. I'm wondering if there is any significance in the wheat harvest, the threshing floor, separating the wheat from the tares. I think it's definitely a symbolism at a certain time. There is a judgment and a separation, and like Jesus used that in his parable, where the angels are to let the wheat and the tares grow together, and at the end time, when they come, they'll separate the wheat from the tares, the believers from the unbelievers. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing, but I think that's what it says. I don't know if there's any more symbolism to it, but it's specifically an end time prophecy parable that Jesus gave. Could the iron and clay feet be Russia and China? I doubt it would be China, because that doesn't seem to fit. Although it does talk about the kings of the east crossing the Euphrates. And if you're talking about the Euphrates, that's probably more like a Chinese attack. And they are a pretty large empire now by themselves, so I doubt it, but yeah, it could be something like that. It's something to think about. I look at the Chinese as being the kings of the East, Russia possibly being the third head of the three-headed eagle, and so I'm not sure how that fits in there. Just to get that in our heads, though, and think about that. Maybe somebody can prove one of those true or even disprove, say why it absolutely can't be. That'd still put us a step ahead. Know the theories, try to disprove some of them, try to prove something if you can. But, all right, well, thank you. So, okay, there we go. All right, well, we will go ahead and stop there for tonight. We'll be back next week. We tend to, most of the time, we're here every Monday. The Prophecy Watchers event that we went to, the conference, went very, very well. So we had a lot of fun there in Colorado Springs. We will be going to the one in Branson in the fall, or not the fall, it's in December, early December. So it should be a lot of fun there also. God bless you guys, and we will see you next week.